Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So today I am bringing you my August wrap up. So this is a little late because this is the third time I'm filming this. I've just had so many problems, either filming or just editing issues. If it sounds like I'm rushing through things, it's because I've talked about these books so many times while filming. I just kind of want to get it over with and share with you my thoughts. If you want more in-depth thoughts, if you feel I'm rushing, feel free to DM me on any of my social medias and I will get back to you. I'm always on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. I post every day there. So without further ado, I'm gonna get started. So during the month of August, I read 11 books and DNF'd one. The first book I read in the month is A Conspiracy in Belgravia by Sherry Thomas. So this is the second book in the Lady Sherlock series. In this series, we follow a young woman named Charlotte Holmes, and she has created this older male persona called Sherlock Holmes, where through him she is able to open up a detective agency and solve mysteries for her clients, as well as help out Scotland Yard when they come to her for things. Of course, not everyone knows that Sherlock Holmes isn't real, and it's actually Sherlock Holmes is actually a young woman, a young unmarried woman. So that in itself causes problems with her relationships, her personal relationships. So I think Sherry Thomas excels in the relationships and the historical setting, because this is Victorian England. Her relationships that she writes are so real and honest, and I feel so connected to some of the characters here. The mysteries are always really layered. It's not a really one-to-one situation where it's obviously the husband or something. So it does kind of keep you on your toes. In this particular one, this is the second book, I felt that the mystery wasn't as engaging initially. However, the mystery did pay off really well. There was a kind of plot twist that I didn't see coming that plays into the larger Sherlock Holmes mythos, I guess. I remember reading the first book and swooning over the first or the main romance, and that doesn't always happen for me. We didn't get a lot of that in this book. We saw more exploration in other characters and other relationships that Charlotte has and other characters in general. Specifically, we saw exploration in Charlotte's younger sister Olivia. Charlotte and her sister Olivia are these really well thought out, well written characters that are just trying to fit in with the times, as well as trying to get what they want out of life, which isn't always just a good marriage. In life, Charlotte wants something to constantly challenge her mind. She's a very bright individual, and she knows that just getting married to a man isn't the best for her. She knows she's not gonna be fulfilled that way, and her younger sister Olivia wants to be a writer, and she knows that that option isn't always available to certain women, or most women in general. This story, or I think this particular installment, really touched upon that more so than the first one. I mean, the first one was riddled with these themes, but this one more so, because I think we were just focusing on Charlotte and her younger sister as individuals, and we were definitely focusing on the setting and the foundations of this world. In the first book, we were really able to hone in on individual characters. I listened to this on audiobook, and there's a lot of characters that get introduced. These are very layered mysteries, so I did find myself getting a little lost at certain times, but I do think that Sherry Thomas is able to wrap up stories pretty well. I am looking forward to the next one. I love this series so much. I am addicted to any kind of reimagining or reinterpretation of the Sherlock Holmes stories, so I am obviously biased a little bit. So the next books I didn't read back to back, but I did focus on this particular series this month, so I can finish it. I like finishing at least one series a month, and that was the Falling Kingdom series, specifically Crystal Storm and Immortal Reign by Morgan Rhodes. This was a pretty hyped up series once upon a time, and it's still looked on, I think, pretty positively in general. These particular books, I'll talk about them as a series as a whole, because some of the events kind of got blurred since I read them so close to each other. I really liked the start of this series. I thought Morgan Rhodes was really not afraid to do certain things with her characters. She was killing off a handful of characters in the first few books, and by the time we got to book 6, the last book, Immortal Reign, I feel that she was kind of playing it safe, and everyone did get a very happy, for the most part, ending. Everything wrapped up with a bow. My favorite characters in the series had a good ending, which is what I wanted, but it was just a little too like cookie cutter for me, especially in the last books. I think that Morgan Rhodes was really kind of doing things out of convenience so her characters wouldn't die or suffer too much or have to go through even more stuff, and add another installment because I think 6 books was pushing it. Some books definitely felt like a kind of filler, propping up the next book in the series type vibe. So I think a lot of things are just added in just so our characters can like conveniently, you know, get stabbed in the chest. Oh, but they're still alive because of this one thing that was introduced earlier on in the book. And it just kind of felt lame a little bit. That being said, I do remember the kind of like angsty addiction that I felt when reading this, when I just wanted to like power through. The earlier books in the series don't even have tabs or notes because I was just powering through because I wanted to get to the end and I was just so excited. And there was still that kind of vibe with these, but I definitely picked up more things that I couldn't let slide or jumped out at me. I don't read critically, but there are obviously things that are so flawed or don't make sense that you have to make note of it, and that's kind of happened with these last books, unfortunately. I know there was like a sequel companion series that I thought about picking up, but it wasn't ever finished because I think they didn't get good numbers like publishing wise. If you've read them, let me know if they're like good or not, but I'm happy with how they ended, even though in general the storytelling was kind of lackluster. I would say the series overall almost gets a generous 4, but the ending kind of just lost it for me, even though the first books were pretty strong in my opinion. So this month I also listened to Hunting Prince Dracula. This is the second book in the long-winded Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco. I hate the name of the series, it's so dumb. In this series, we follow a young woman named Audrey Rose, and she wants to be a forensic scientist, medical examiner. That's the career she wants in life. She's a woman, and I don't know which time period this takes place in. I'm assuming the Victorian era because so many books just happen to take place in that era. She has the privilege of her uncle being a medical examiner, forensic scientist, and that's kind of where she learned the craft initially. So she does get the privilege through her uncle to get to this very prestigious forensic sciences school that is in Romania. And while she's there, a bunch of bodies start piling up, and these bodies have like these signs of like being vampire related deaths, like a body is staked and a body is drained of blood, and there's like vampire marks on its neck, things like that. And she and her companion Thomas, who's also her love interest, band together to solve the mystery. I really want to love this series because I hear so many positive things, specifically on like Bookstagram. It's hyped up all the time, more so than on YouTube. But even on YouTube, I've seen some people say the romance in general just kind of makes up for like everything that might feel a little lackluster, because it's a very like straightforward type of like mystery. There's nothing super nuanced about the series. So I was particularly looking forward to the romance, and I've talked about this before that the romance is so hyped up that I was like, oh, perfect, I will find something to enjoy. That being said, the books that I've read so far are fine. The romance has gone a bit better because I do remember being so kind of like frustrated or just annoyed with the love interest in general from the first book, and he has gotten better. And I will continue on with the series because the premise is interesting to me, and the series just doesn't have a really great start in my opinion. Maybe it ends on a really great note. I don't think I would have like continued on, but because there's hype around it and people talk about it so much, I'm sticking with it, and I listen to it like from my library, so it's not like I'm like wasting money or anything. But yeah, it's just kind of like disappointing, I think. I really don't fall into hype that much, so this is very much like on me. But yeah, I just wish that I loved it more because so many people adore the series. So after I listened to that audiobook, I listened to Kiss Cut by Karen Slaughter. This is her second book in the Grant County series. These are these like mystery thriller series where I don't think you have to like read them in order. They're not like super story dependent from one book to another. Well, before I get into the author, this particular book, we follow a few people. There's like 3 main characters, and In this book, there is this shootout that happens outside of an ice skating rink, and a few people are hurt, some die, and when the medical examiner slash pediatrician does her investigation on one of the people who died, she finds things that lead to secrets being revealed in this very small town. So we have those like small town secret vibe stories, which are very fun for me. Karen Slaughter is not going to be the author for everyone. I'm saying that like right here, like flat out. She writes very explicit content with a lot of trigger warnings attached. Specifically in this book, we have pedophilia, we have incest, we have sexual abuse, we have rape, we have domestic abuse, we have like homophobia. We have talks about, it's kind of hard to frame this, but there's a discussion about abortion, and someone gets shamed for that. So there's a lot of content here. That's a lot of trigger warnings already. If I'm missing something, I would just check on Goodreads or some other reviews to see what I might be missing, but it's a lot, and Karen Slaughter doesn't mind writing the gory or explicit bits. I think she does write thrillers really, really well. She's definitely one of those authors where I don't like putting down the book because I am like so in the middle of it. I listen to this on audio, but still I've read her physical books as well, and they're both audio, physically, are both really enticing, and they do really grab my attention. This particular book was really frustrating, and this is coming from someone who doesn't ever really feel like they need to connect or like a character to like the book. As long as I understand the character and I understand their motives and their backgrounds and it makes sense for said character, I'll be fine with that. I don't have to like love them and want to be their friend in order to like the book. But this book, literally every like main character that we follow the pediatrician slash forensic scientist, we follow the sheriff, and then we follow a deputy, and they were all super problematic, and I don't think that people would like seeing or reading from their like point of views on certain things. The pediatrician, who's supposed to be like the good kind of moral character, was like abortion shaming, and that just put a sour taste in my mouth about her character. The sheriff is the kind of, he's like framed as like the good guy that the community likes, but he's also really like shallow when it comes to women, specifically his ex-wife, who is the pediatrician character, and he's like one of those like male characters that like in the middle of something very serious, he's like thinking about a woman sexually, and he could be in the middle of like a shootout or something, and he's like, oh my god, she looks so beautiful or something, and it doesn't make sense for what's going on in the book. And then the detective character, who is flawed, and it's obvious that she's written in a flawed way. She's going through a dark period in her life. She was recently sexually assaulted prior to the beginning of the book, and her twin sister, I believe, passed away. She's dealing with a lot of things, and she's in a very negative place, and I understand that aspect of the character. And the detective character, I didn't particularly care for her like homophobic, specifically lesbophobic mindset, especially when, this might be a spoiler, but it's for her sister who passed away, who she's like mourning her, but at the same time like thinking negatively about her sister being a lesbian and the relationship that she had with another woman. It was just like not the vibe for me. It just made me like, it just frustrated me. I'm fine with the character being like a negative person because she's going through negative things, and that like affects her relationships with other people, but the lesbophobic rants or ideology that she has, especially when it's in connection to her sister who's dead and she's like mourning her, but at the same time has, again, homophobic tendencies towards her sister's relationships. It just it doesn't like vibe and mesh well with the character, in my opinion. It just came out of like, it just felt like the character had to be negative for the sake of being negative. I do want to read more Karen Slaughter because again, she does write thriller really well, but like I'm really like annoyed with the main characters of this particular series. I know that she has another series that she writes in, and then she also has a few standalones, so we'll see where I go next with her, but I'm not totally sure if I'll pick up the next one so soon after this. So after that, I listened to Squire by Tamora Pierce. This is the third book in the Protector of the Small series. I've talked about the series before. It's about a young girl, or she starts off as a young girl in the series. Her name is Kelladry, and Kelladry wants to be a Knight of the Realm, and because of things that happened in other series that Tamora Pierce has written, women can now sign up to be a Knight of the Realm. It's not like a boys only club anymore. That doesn't mean that she is gonna have an easy time. She's the only woman who's like done this. Like, she's the first one who's actually actively trying to be a knight after the laws have changed, and there are a lot of people that are working against her, and that becomes very prominent here. There's a lot of like sabotage for her. There's a lot of sabotage in her journey to become a knight. In this particular book, this is the third book, and I don't want to like spoil anything, but obviously the entire goal of the series is for her to become a knight, and at this point in the series she is going to be a squire, and in order to like get through her like squirehood, she actually has to squire for a fully fledged knight. And at the beginning of the book, she's like worried that no one's gonna want her because she's the only girl, and a lot of knights are still fairly conservative, but she does eventually get the offer from a very prominent knight who's actually really good friends with the king, who we met in an older series that Tamora Pierce has written. And I actually really love this book. This is probably one of my favorite Tamora Pierce books that I've read in a while. I've liked the series as a whole in general, but the last book in particular kind of felt a little weak. It felt very much like a build up to where we are now. This book made me cry so much, and it made me cry for like things that I didn't think I would cry about. I cried over a bird in this book, like seriously. The relationship that Kelladry builds with the man that she's squiring for is so pure, and it's so sweet, and it's almost like a mentor kind of fun uncle father type relationship, which is so like beautiful. I love those kinds of family bonds that grow from people who aren't like blood related. I mean, we've had animal companions in this series before, and I feel like we always have like an animal companion in a lot of Tamora Pierce's books, but in this one we get a new one. I believe, if I remember, it's a griffin. So this series takes place in this greater Tortile universe that Tamora Pierce has written in before extensively, and I just really love when authors have like a world of books in a series, like their own kind of like cinematic universe, but like literary universe, because my favorite thing is when authors put like little Easter eggs or they reference characters from other books. I just like love that kind of like, oh, I know what she's talking about moment, and you get that here. And this is probably one of my favorite literary universes in general. Tamora Pierce is one of my favorite fantasy authors. I love everything she's written, and I'm hoping to like get through my Tamora Pierce backlog. I have a few other series to tackle, and I know that she has another universe that's not connected to this one. I just love the series so much, and I hope that other people read Tamora Pierce, because she's like really respected in the industry. I know a lot of women authors talk about how Tamora Pierce was like a foundation for them as authors, so I hope that more people kind of harken back to Tamora Pierce, because she is a bit older of like her work is a bit older. I think her very first series in this universe was written in the 80s, so sometimes it might feel a little dated, but it's very much like classic medieval fantasy that I love. So the next book I want to talk about is a little hard to explain because it's like a sequel series that very much is a sequel to an earlier series, and that is the Vortex Chronicles by Elise Kova. This is the sequel series to Awakens by Elise Kova. Awakens is a fantastic series. I hope more people read it. I do think out of like a lot of indie authors that she's a fairly popular indie author. In fantasy, I do think that Awakens is pretty popular for like an indie author. The events that happen in Awakens definitely have a connection to this Vortex Chronicles series. This is going to sound really vague, but I don't want to give anything away. In this series, we follow a crown princess named Vi. So Vi has actually never grown up in the capital, the capital city where she's supposed to eventually rule. She is a crown princess, and she does have a younger twin brother. She's grown up in a very distant, far off location from the capital, so she doesn't really know the people that she's supposed to rule, and like the Senate doesn't always trust her because of course she hasn't like grown up there, and the people don't know her, and so on. So she does feel a lot of pressure that way. But in this world, people have elemental abilities. We have air magic, water magic, earth magic, fire magic, and in the first book, Vi is very much waiting for her abilities to awaken because she is a late bloomer, like her mother before her, so no one's really kind of like worried. They kind of just assume you're a late bloomer like your mother, you'll be fine. And when her abilities do awaken, they're not the typical elemental abilities that we're familiar with. It's something completely different, and she starts having these visions that are a little different than the normal visions that people have in this world. I know it sounds so vague, but that's all I can say, because again, this is kind of connected to an earlier series. We do have some chosen one tropes as well, and I do think Elise Kova typically writes a lot of romance within a lot of her books. I've only read her Awakens series, which did have a lot of romance. That was very much a romance-centric story, and I'm assuming this one will be heavy on romance as well. So I remember binge reading the Awakens series. It's 5 books, but I read the entirety of the series within a month's time, and it's so well done, and it's so addicting, and there was a lot of like high stakes, and there were a lot of moments where I felt so emotional and I cried, and I'm really looking forward to that in this series. Unfortunately, the first book in this series kind of didn't really give me much to work with. It was very much like setting up the story and where we're at in this world, which is, you know, I need that obviously, but I didn't really get connected to any characters, slightly the main character, but it was a little lackluster because I do remember getting so quickly addicted from book 1. I didn't get that here. That being said, I have already started the second book. I'll talk about that in my September wrap up, and I am much more interested now, but the first book left a lot to be desired considering my high expectations after reading Awakens. Every month I try to like focus on a series to like read in the month, like try to get a few installments out of the way, and this month I am focusing on this Vortex Chronicle series. I wouldn't start off reading Elise Kova from this series, but yeah, Elise Kova has all her books on Kindle Unlimited. I know it's like an Amazon affiliated program, which is like icky, but it's the best way for me with my limited funds to read as many like indie authors as I can, which I try to do every now and again. So yeah, if you're interested in anything Elise Kova related, maybe you've heard of her other series, I think she can really like grab an audience with her work. So also using Kindle Unlimited, I read Heart of the Fae by Emma Hamm. I've been really wanting to read Emma Hamm for a while. I also am really interested in the works that she's publishing in her like pen name. She has another name she writes under called, I think it's Elizabeth Frost. I could be wrong. But I had started reading this book earlier a while ago, and I knew I wasn't in the right headspace to read this particular book before, but I finally picked it up again and I really loved it. It's so good. Heart of the Fae is a Beauty and the Beast Irish folklore inspired fae retelling, and we follow a young girl named Sorka, and Sorka is one of many girls that live in a brothel. She herself doesn't like work at the brothel, she just like lives there with her sisters, and her village is being kind of like plagued by this like disease that's killing off a lot of people. Her like adoptive father has now gotten the disease, and she knows it's only a matter of time before it spreads to her sisters and herself. So a fae comes up to her and offers her a deal for a cure, and all she has to do is find the cure from this fae that's on this like isolated island in the like fae world. Obviously the fae that she's looking for is going to be like her love interest, like the Beast character who's like been exiled. Our Beast character was once the crown prince of the Seelie Fae, and for reasons he's now not. So this is obviously romance. Don't expect so much like political intrigue. It's very much just kind of this journey for Sorka to get what she needs from this Fae character, and obviously their friendship relationship doesn't start out so well. It's a very antagonistic one. I did really fall in love with Emma Hamm's writing, and I really loved her Beast perspectives, because we do follow everything from Sorka's point of view, but we do occasionally get the Beast POV, and I really enjoyed it. We have very interesting side characters, and I think Heart of the Fae and its sequel, Veins of Magic, I think is what it's called, are the only books that Emma Hamm's written that have to be read in order. I don't think you have to read anything in publication order after that. If I remember correctly, I think she typically writes like retellings or like folklore inspired like fae stories. I think a lot of what Emma Hamm writes is very much on trend for booktube that really loves these very fae centric stories that you get from like the bigger publishers. I think Emma Hamm is self-published. I don't think she has an indie publisher, but I could be wrong. Either way, she's definitely not like hyped or backed by like a major publisher. I think a lot of people would like the books that she writes if they just like knew about her. That being said, she does have like an amazing social media like presence, and I follow her, and I just like love looking at her feed, and I love the cover reveals that she's doing on her Instagram, so I suggest you follow her there. I just think she's fantastic. After that, I listened to The Vanishing Star by Maureen Johnson. This is the second book in the Truly Devious mystery series, YA mystery series. I actually really enjoyed this one. Not that I hated the first one. I thought the first one was fine, but one of my issues with the first one was that I wasn't getting any answers. We were introduced to a mystery and we got more questions, and I felt like I didn't get any answers. But if you don't know the premise of the story, we follow Stevie, who is a true crime expert, and she's very fascinated with this particular crime that occurred at the school that she's going to go to. This school was founded by this man, this very eccentric personality, and his wife and daughter went missing, and someone else died during this missing persons event, and there was someone that was caught for the crime, but it's pretty obvious for most people that the person who was like convicted or charged with the crime didn't do this. It was a patsy. And so Stevie has read every inch of literature on this particular crime. It's kind of like one of those cult following crimes, and she's going to the school that was opened by the same eccentric man who lost his family, and that's why she was accepted to the school in the first place. And that's kind of where the story starts off. Again, the first book didn't really give me much to work with. A lot of the characters were very frustrating for me, but this book definitely did get better. I really love the chapters where there's like a dual timeline. We follow the man who opened the school before in the 30s, I want to say. I love those chapters a lot, but Stevie's perspective is also really good. I love her like inquisitive mind that we see. We got a lot of reveals, but then those reveals led to more questions, and I love that kind of rhythm in mysteries. The one thing that I absolutely do not like, and I just don't get, like I can't wrap my mind around, is the romance. For some reason, Stevie likes this guy that it like baffles me, because so Stevie's love interest is so frustrating. Not because like he's doing dumb things, like he does do dumb shit, but like he's that guy. Okay, so this might not be super relatable to everyone, but bear with me here. He is the guy that you had like some classes with in high school or middle school or whatever, and he is obnoxiously loud, and he's doing obnoxious things to maybe get a reaction out of people, maybe laughter or something, but it's more so just like you're getting in the way of everything. Like, please shut the fuck up, because no one cares about what you have to say. No one cares. You're irrelevant. For some reason, everyone likes him, but if he was a real person in real life, no one would like him. He is such a tool. Like, I don't get why Stevie like loves him, and then everyone's like, oh, he's such a cool guy to hang out with. There's literally nothing cool about him. He literally just talks. It's like he just talks and just like ruins the vibe. Everyone could be having a good time, and then he'll just start talking about like, what was me, and I'm like, dude, shut up. Like, you're so annoying. Also, I think the author tried to give us like some kind of sob story background, which and I do feel bad for him because his father sucks ass, but you're still annoying. That's the one thing that messes me up with the series. Like if she just didn't have a love interest, this would be so much better. After that, I read The Dead House by Dawn Kurtagich. This was a really fantastic horror novel. I've been trying to actively read more horror now that I have unknowingly been reading horror. Now I actually want to continue that and like read like consciously pick up horror. I picked up The Dead House at my used bookstore because I was looking for another book written by Don Kitteridge, and they only had this one. But I was still pleasantly surprised. This book is written in a kind of journal, multi-mixed media format. There is like journal entries, there is emails, there is text messages. There are also like random note snippets or whatever. So I actually do have the physical book. So this journal kind of builds up to this very tragic event where a school burned down, 3 people died, and then 1 person went missing. And this journal belongs to a young girl who went to this school. Her name is Caitlin Johnson, and Caitlin Johnson's a very unique character because she doesn't exist. She's actually the alter personality of another young girl named Carly Johnson. And Caitlin's journal was so well written for like a multi-mixed media format. You really felt so much sympathy for her. Caitlin is also supposed to be like the main suspect for this tragic event. But you feel so bad for her because everyone is constantly telling her that she doesn't exist, that she is a bad person, that she needs to leave so Carly can mentally get better. It was just so well done. This is a mixture of like psychological horror as well as there are some paranormal elements as well. I always worry when a main character is supposed to have a mental illness and I'm not really sure how it is done. I've never had a dissociative identity disorder. I would have to look up reviews for how that was handled. That being said, of course there's going to be trigger warnings relating to that. Caitlin and Carly are going in and out of like inpatient, outpatient treatment. I always worry about how mental illness is portrayed in like horror thriller novels because I don't ever want the person with a mental illness to be villainized because of their mental illness. So I would be wary going into that if that might make you uncomfortable. Caitlin and Carly do go between inpatient, outpatient like treatment. And there's discussions of that in this book. Caitlin doesn't see herself as an alter despite the fact that everyone's telling her she is. Caitlin and Carly firmly believe that they are sisters that just happen to be born in the same body. They're two different souls. I don't think the book ever tried to push a narrative one way or the other. I think the girls just dealt with the situation at hand the best they could. In my notes, I mentioned how I kind of guessed who the whodunit character, like the person who's kind of responsible for the horror elements. I think the build-up was really well done. I personally don't need to be surprised by like the villain or whoever it was, like the reveal. Like if I guess a reveal, I'm not like super bummed. That's just not the character I am. Like that's not the reader I am. I think it was still really well done. There's a bittersweet ending that kind of like broke my heart but made me just like love the characters more. The author did a really good job at like differentiating between Carly and Caitlin because they are their own people. Yeah, I really love this book so much and I really want to read her other book. I think it's And the Trees Crept In. So the book that I did DNF this month, unfortunately, was These Witches Don't Burn, I think is what it's called, by Isabel Sterling. This is supposed to be something that I think I would have liked a lot. This is a sapphic witchy story that takes place in Salem. We follow a young girl named Hannah, and Hannah is part of a coven, and this coven tries really hard to keep the existence of actual witches a secret. They don't want any Salem Witch Trials 2.0 happening. So that's its own little plot itself. But Hannah has also recently broken up with another girl in her coven named Veronica, and she still feels very conflicted. She has these kind of feelings somewhat for her still. I can understand why. Veronica is, I don't know how big the coven is. I didn't meet many people in this coven, but I'm assuming that lesbian witches aren't like a lot in this small coven in Salem. So I can get the continued like attraction for her. I only got 16% of the way in, and I feel like the majority of that 16 Hannah and Veronica were arguing all the time. I felt that there was absolutely no reason for Hannah to like still really have these like intense attraction emotions to Veronica, because they were fighting all the time. And in this 16%, I could tell that Veronica was like the most manipulative, rude ex-girlfriend ever. So every time Hannah would converse with her or argue with her, it was always like, she's so frustrating, but she's so beautiful, like, oh my god, like, did I make the right decision type feelings. And it was just really frustrating to read, because if you are arguing so much in just this short amount of time, you're like not meant to be together. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't like reading someone like flopping between these two like mindsets, like, should we be together, should we not. It's just, get it over with, let's move on, because I don't want to focus on this part of the story. Also, it felt like we were dropped in the middle of a different plot, because the reason that Hannah and Veronica broke up, it was mentioned, or like vague mentioned a lot, why Hannah and Veronica broke up, but it was never like a clear, like the readers never got a clear story, at least up to this point. I'm sure she like discusses it later on in the book, but it just felt very like, tell me why they broke up, because like I don't want to find out about it like 40% of the way through. Obviously it's been settled because they did break up, but it was just like this kind of vague, kind of like, you know what happened, we were in New York and you did that thing and you hurt my feelings and I almost died, but you betrayed me, like going back and forth. And I was like, but what the fuck happened? Because no one's telling me anything, and I'm gonna find out what happened like 40% of the way through. I'm not gonna be happy because you've already broken up, like who cares. There's also another side plot where there might be a like evil blood witch, which are supposed to be like bad witches in town. So I couldn't tell if we were gonna go for a more contemporary approach to this like fantastical plot, which would have been fine. I'm fine with that. Or if we wanted to focus more on like the mystery aspect. But I could just tell personally from like the first 16% that it was not going to give the proper approach to either plotline, the contemporary relationship issues and the murderous blood witch plot line. I also know that a new girl comes into town and that girl attracts Hannah's attention. I never got that far into it to meet this new girl, so I have no opinion on that whatsoever. Maybe my opinions are wrong because I didn't get that far in the book, and maybe the author did get better throughout the book, but I just wasn't vibing from the first handful of chapters. It wasn't for me. This might be a little premature as well, but I could tell from what I read, I don't think I would have given this book more than like a 3-star rating, and I'd rather focus my time on something that might be better. And the last book that I read this month ended up being my favorite, and it's actually a YA contemporary. I'm shocked, I know, fantasy, who, get her out of the way. Love Bow Taipei by Abigail Hing Wen was absolutely fantastic. So this YA contemporary follows a young first-generation Chinese American girl named Ever Wong, and Ever Wong has grown up with these kind of like almost stereotypical Chinese immigrant parents who came from China to give their children a better life. They're very strict parents, and they very much want their daughters to go into a very like academic field. They specifically want Ever to be a doctor, and Ever has actually been accepted to a very good university. I forgot the university's name, but it is a very good school that has a med school that she could go on to. But Ever has also been a dancer her whole life, and she actually gets off the wait list and gets accepted to the School of Dance at Tisch NYU, which is also a very good opportunity for her. That in itself has created a conflict between her and her parents. Her relationship with her parents is also just conflicted in general, not just based off of this situation, but they don't let her do a lot of things. They tell her to dress a certain way, which friends she should hang out with, which boys she can't. I mean, she can't really talk to boys, but you know, they're just very like helicopters type style parenting, just like hovering over her, and she doesn't like that. But she loves her parents so much because she knows the sacrifices they've made, and at the beginning of the book it very much feels like a guilt type motivation, like she does the things that she does out of guilt. And throughout the book that guilt kind of grows into respect, which I think is a very good growth that we see, because I mean, she knows the sacrifices her parents have made. Her father specifically is, or was, like a well-respected doctor in China, but when they came over to the States, like his licenses aren't valid for some reason, and now he just like sweeps floors at the local hospital, which is a very unfortunate situation. It's not like Ever never knew this, she does, but that guilt, that kind of like guilt tripping feeling kind of grows to more a respect level, and I really love that progression throughout the entirety of the book. The entire book is just about learning to respect yourself and your family, but also kind of knowing what's right for you and knowing where to find that kind of middle ground, because it's very easy to be like, well, you're 18, you can do whatever you want, but at the same time, you just don't, especially if you have like a semi-decent relationship with your parents. Of course, this doesn't like apply to everyone. You can't just do whatever you want regardless of your parents, because I personally still have my parents like very embedded in my life. So if someone said just forget what your parents say, do whatever you want, I can't just do that. And Ever, who's still 17 or 18, she can't just do whatever she wants. So finding that balance between doing what she wants and doing what her parents want is a very hard line, and not everyone's going to be happy towards the end with Ever's decisions, but it's real, and that's what I appreciated about this. I'm of course not a first generation Chinese American, but Ever's story is very relatable to a lot of people. I haven't even talked about like the plot in general. Oh my god. So Ever's parents put her in this Chinese cultural program over the summer, where she's going to fly to Taipei and go to this school where she's going to take classes like Mandarin or calligraphy, Chinese medicine, fan dancing, stuff like that. And what she and her parents don't know is that it's pretty much an open secret that this particular school is almost like a dating matchmaking school, where students are also kind of encouraged to like break the rules and like mingle. And a lot of people who have gone to this particular school have come out with like future like proposals or marriages. A lot of Chinese families that send their children to this school are also looking for a good like family match. There's a little more, it's not like arranged marriages or anything, but the families who send their children to the school expect other families of like the same socioeconomic presence, I guess is one way to say. It's kind of hard to explain, and of like the same like social class. I really like how the author approached the Chinese stereotypes and just like greater East Asian stereotypes. In particular, for example, there is this like group of boys that Ever meets at this school, and throughout the year they have this kind of like project where they want to like break the kind of stereotypes that East Asian men have. But I thought it was just some parts really witty with how she handled that, and I really enjoyed that. The one thing that I wish was done better was this love triangle that we were given. I don't immediately hate love triangles. I think a lot of people have written them off. I can still be very optimistic about love triangles. So out of the two guys, I preferred the one that she didn't choose for her, because she was genuinely interested in him, and I felt that their relationship could have started off in a very like good level. And when she did decide on the guy that she wanted to be with, she really didn't handle the breakup with the other one very well. There's a moment where she sat down and she's like, okay, I need to like settle my relationships with both of these guys. For the guy that she didn't choose, she kind of avoided talking to him and sorting out her feelings and her decisions, and it felt very like, why would you avoid him? You just said you were going to talk to him, and now you're avoiding him, and you're just kind of delaying the inevitable. And it was just very frustrating to read. I just wish the love triangle had just ended differently, but that could just be like a personal preference. Yeah, I really love this book so much, and I know that there's going to be a sequel, follow-up companion novel, and I hope that it follows the guy that she doesn't choose, because he's like a really good character and I really fell in love with him. So that is all I read this month. I hope you pick something up based off of what I read. Maybe I like convince you not to pick up something from here. Either way, please let me know in the comments. I will try to respond. I'm not like super great at responding on YouTube comments, I'll be honest, but I'm always like on Instagram, so if you want to talk to me, that's probably the place to do it. I'll link all my socials below, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Peace out.